Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Appreciate everybody being here and really appreciate members of the public streaming and being able to listen to this meeting of the Cincinnati School Board Budget, Finance, and Growth Committee. We have an extensive agenda as always, and we're going to try to keep it to that 90-minute time frame. But first of all, I wanted to welcome you and then also suggest, since this is the first meeting of this calendar year, protocol demands that this former committee chair, I will preside until the new chair is selected. And Treasurer Wagner, will you please take attendance?
Ms. Bolton?
Present.
Ms. Bates?
Present.
Mr. Messer? Do we know, is he joining? Is he going to join?
He might be. We haven't heard that he's not. Ms. Bates, would you please lead the pledge for us?
I will. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mrs. Bates, and Treasurer Wagner in particular. At this time, you did very well. This is the one thing in one of the many things in remote that has to somehow get improvement is how we do the Pledge of Allegiance, because we're all on different delays, but the spirit is there and the pride of country is there. Bates, would you please allow me to entertain a motion to adjust the agenda for today, and would you make that motion?
Yes, I move that we add to new business an item, refinancing for COPS.
Thank you. Treasurer Wagner, I'll second it. And Treasurer Wagner, will you do the roll call?
Mrs. Bates?
Aye.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Motion carries.
This is a lot better than board meetings, isn't it? It really goes a lot faster. Or sometimes it does. Also, as the temporary chair, the chair will entertain motions to nominate the chair for the calendar year 2021. Ms. Bates.
And I nominate Eve Bolton for chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Bates. I appreciate it. I really do. I'll take that nomination. So if you still stand by that nomination, we have a chair for this calendar year. Madam Chair, back at you. It's soon to be continuing as Health and Safety Chair. I appreciate the confidence. If we could, then we've done all of that we had to do. And now what we want to do, if we can, is set up the meeting schedule for calendar year 2021. And previously, after some casual conversations, we determined, if possible, to schedule our meetings for the third Thursday of each month. And originally we talked about the time of 3:15, but that's now been moved appropriately to 4. So that's the third Thursday every month at 4 p.m. And we will be remote as the district is remote and in person and blended when the district goes back as blended or in person. And the only 2 months that we don't have scheduled, or the only month we don't have scheduled is September, because the third Thursday of September falls directly into the Yom Kippur commemoration and holiday, which is, of course, something we want to avoid. So I would propose, if possible, that we move it to the third Wednesday of that month, and that would be, I think, the 15th. So that would be my proposal, and we are hoping not to have to meet in July. So that's the proposal, and sort of it's been kind of casually discussed among some members and also somewhat coordinated with the other board committees. Base, does that sound like a reasonable committee schedule for you and would work?
I think so. The only caveat I would add, you said that we would be remote as the schools are remote, and then we would move into in-person as the schools move into in-person. I've been planning the Health and Safety Committee meeting, and we are, it was brought to my attention that the audio, if we expect participation, the audio is much better virtually. So I wouldn't just carte blanche say we're going back. We can just kind of play it by ear and see who's presenting, and then make that decision based on the recommendation of Jeremy and Rob.
Great, I think that's a great suggestion, and we'll remove that part of the determination for the meeting schedule regarding remote or in person, and at least for now, play it by ear. That makes great sense. What also then needs to happen, if Lauren Roberts is involved with this right now, I know Lauren, that you have to be kind of liaisoning, if you will, with the audit committee. And I know that you all have to create a calendar for this calendar year. One of the requests from the Finance Committee is that the week of the Audit Committee not be the same week as the Finance and Budget and Growth Committee, if that's possible. And I would suggest you also kind of make that arrangement for the Health and Safety, since both Member Messer and Chair Bates will be on that committee as well.
That's great. I'm working with the board office right now to determine the 2021 schedule, and I just sent Phyllis a list of suggested dates, aiming for the final Wednesday of each month. I think that successfully avoids our other committee and board meetings, but I think she's going to review, and then if so, I'll forward it to our audit committee and finance chairs for final review as well.
That's great. Thank you. Appreciate
Thank you.
it, Lauren. You bet. You bet. And I know that the staff is putting together a complete calendar of all the committee meetings, and that I think will be helpful to everybody. So we have the meeting schedule taken care of. The schedule is okay. Determine the audit. We did that, so we're in good shape. Now, if we can move, I think it's to item 3 of the agenda. And that would be Mr. Fischel and Mr. Hoyne, I think.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
There you go. I'm pleased to be joined today by Michael Fischel, our partner for property casualty insurance matters. He's with Assured Partners, and Michael, with Assured and previously through Nice Lukens, has been our partner for property casualty insurance for many years. That has lots of value to us, his experience with us, because he knows us and knows lots of the programs that we offer and the areas where we incur risk. And then his job and Assured Partners' job is to help us to have an insurance program that mitigates against those risks and makes sure that if we have any catastrophic losses in any of these areas, that we have insurance to cover it. So Michael has been with us for many years, and we have over the years made sure that the brokerage services that Assured provides is cost effective. We did a RFP that Mike participated in about 3 years ago, and they were the clear winner from the team who evaluated the different brokers. So I think Michael used to present more frequently at the Finance Committee meeting. I think it's good just every once in a while for the Finance Committee especially to understand the insurance program that we have, to give you a very brief kind of view as to what's happening in the market for insurance, and then to give you the opportunity to ask any questions. So we'll just take about 5 minutes here of your time. First, some background on our program, and I'm going to share my screen if I can figure out how to do that. There were several documents provided in your packet. Michael provided a sort of a narrative describing the current market and what CPS is facing. But there was also a diagram that I think you should be able to see on your screen now. I realize the type is probably small. But this basically describes the risk mitigation, the insurance program that CPS has as far as property casualty. Property casualty would be all losses related to fires, floods, or other casualties affecting our property, our buildings. And then liability insurance would be all the kind of lawsuits or liability that might be brought against the district. So this is the program, the insurance program that protects us. Basically, it can be divided into, on the liability side, 3 different components: automobile liability, general liability, and school board liability. You can see for automobile liability, that's all the cars that our trades folks have vans out there. Our security folks have vehicles. Our all the areas where we may incur automobile liability, we have first dollar coverage, and so any automobile claims are essentially handled off immediately to the insurer. And then there's layers of insurance. So if a claim exceeds $1 million, then it goes to the next layer of insurance that's covered by Genesis, and then an umbrella coverage by Euclid and Hallmark. So you can see there's different layers for automobile insurance. Same for our general liability and our school board liability policies. Essentially, with those policies, we have a $250,000, what can be described as a deductible. It's a self-insured retention. So essentially, if we have any kind of liability, slip and fall, to negligence claims, to any kind of claims against the school board, malpractice by your general counsel, we would be covered. We would be covered at the first layer that we are self-insured. So we have the first $250,000 of liability that we cover ourselves. The next layer is covered by our company that we've worked with for a couple of years now, Genesis. They have a layer up to $5 million. And then if there's claims that would exceed that $5 million, again, we have that umbrella coverage to make sure that the school district is protected up to $15 million. That's sort of our coverage limit. That describes our program. And then just very briefly, I want to describe kind of what the current landscape looks like. The cost for our insurance has risen dramatically, I'd say, especially in the last year and a half here. This is another table that was included in your packet. You can see that for many years, or for quite a few years, at least my experience with the district, our insurance costs were relatively stable. So again, dividing into a couple different buckets here, property insurance would be if there's a fire or flood affecting a tornado affecting one of our properties, our buildings. We have coverage, of course, to mitigate against that risk. And that coverage basically stayed about the same cost from year to year until 2019-20, when it increased 30%, and then again almost 50%. This is almost 50% since the 2016-17 rates. So the 47% increase, but it's all really basically occurred in the last 2 years here. Our auto has gone up significantly. That's not quite as costly an insurance program. And then our overall liability has, again, increased dramatically from 1920 to 21. We went from increases of 0%, 3%, 4.5% to all of a sudden experiencing a really dramatic increase. So I wanted to share that because our department wasn't necessarily prepared for that with respect to our budget. You can see, I mean, we experienced a more than almost $30,000 increase in 1 year, and we had the need to go back to the treasurer's office to supplement what we were paying for insurance. That's not because of any big claims with CPS. To date, our claim history is very, very good. In fact, I think that makes us very marketable. And then as our broker, essentially Michael's job is to go out and shop and try to get the very best coverage for the very best rates year after year after year. And that's what he does. The costs really increase, we think, are market driven. And in the same way that fuel prices can increase dramatically from year to year, and that would increase, our transportation costs. That's essentially what's happened in the insurance market. Insurance has become very expensive over the last 2 years. So we hope that's we're reaching the end of that hard market and that we have a little better renewals going forward. But we're exploring ways to limit those increases. One of the ways we're exploring that is to potentially increase our self-insured coverage or our self-insured retention. So I talked about our current program is that we have $250,000 deductible that we are responsible for first. That hasn't risen in probably 5 or 10 years now. And so one of the things we're exploring is if we increase that deductible, again, we'd be responsible for claims then up to $300,000 or $400,000 or $500,000, but then that would reduce hopefully the premiums that we would pay for the coverage above that. So that's one of the things we're exploring. Glad to answer any questions. And again, Michael's on the line as well. So any questions from the board, we'd be happy to respond.
Mrs. Bates, do you have any questions?
No, it looks solid to me. I think Michael's done a great job for us.
I would agree. And Member Messer has joined us. We just
My
are dealing with
apologies.
insurance. Not a problem. Not a problem.
We've gotten a few thousand emails recent, literally a few thousand. I'm in the hole.
Really?
And so I'm trying to pull all that out, and Melanie's like, well, it's in text too. Well, that's even worse right now. So my apologies, but I know the office said they'd get them on the calendar going forward. So my apologies.
Great. Not a problem. Appreciate you being here. And then I don't have any particular questions. I too have great respect for Mr. Fischel. But I just wanted a process question for you before I go to the treasurer. Who recommends this to us? Is it a combined committee? Is it the treasurer and the general counsel? Are there any other sorts of committees or groups that recommend adoption or make the recommendation to the board, Mr. Hoyne?
Yeah, pretty. There's lots of companies and even public entities that have sort of risk management departments that would, sort of be thoughtful about how you're managing claims versus what goes to insurance and what levels. That has been done all pretty much within the Office of General Counsel. So we meet with Michael and our insurance team at least quarterly, something depending on what's going on. That team includes myself, Assistant Counsel Stephanie Scott, Cynthia Bolnia participates in those meetings. She's our safety expert, and she has been very helpful in showing some of the risk reduction programs that has been helpful to our insurance rates. Robin Brandon, from a property perspective, often participates in those meetings. Bill Mooring before her were often, we have an insurance program for our boilers, for example, and obviously she's interested in the property insurance, so she's participated. And then in terms of recommending, we have selected Assured Partners as sort of our broker. And then Michael is the one out there and his team marketing year after year, trying to get us the best cost on insurance. So it's like having a travel agent in some ways. And, we don't do an RFP every time we need to fly to, New York. We have a travel agent who's out there hopefully getting us the best price and the best product. Very similar with insurance. Michael's our broker for insurance products. So he's out there trying to get us the best product at the best price. We don't do an RFP each and every time we have a new carrier. All commercial insurance is pretty much sold on a year-to-year basis. So it's every year we re-look at our property insurance and our liability insurance to make sure we're with the best carrier and getting the best price. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it certainly does. Thank you, Mr. Hoyne. Treasurer Wagner, you had your hand up. Oh, unmute.
Sorry.
Okay.
I don't know if I missed this because I was trying to update Ryan with what happened before he jumped on, but do we have an estimate for fiscal year 21, 22 in dollars for premiums?
General Counsel
Michael,
or Mr. Fischel?
We are in the process of marketing the liability program, which renews in the middle of March. That'll be coming to the board at the end of February. It's too early for me to give you premiums. They're going up, is all I can tell you. And that has really nothing to do with CPS's loss record. Your loss record for the liability program is nearly perfect in over 20 years. There's been one claim, one covered claim, in excess of the self-insured retention. I hope you guys understand how phenomenal a result that is. It's carriers don't believe it, and I actually give them 20 years of loss data to document it. In terms of where the market is, as I put in my narrative, there have been 4 hard markets in my 36, 37-year insurance career. This is the worst one we've ever seen. So the fact that you have a great loss record, the fact that you've got Cynthia on staff and Robin on staff, doing tremendous jobs of controlling losses in Cynthia's case. What she's done on the work comp is nothing short of astounding. And what Robin has done in facilities with, the help of that whole group, you don't have property claims. So you're almost too good for today's market, if that makes any sense at all. And where it really helps out, though, is the carriers are going to be a lot more benign to you than they would be to, other urban districts that I know of in the state that just have much higher retentions because otherwise their premiums against their losses do not make any sense. So I expect to have the first wave of quotes. We get the quotes in layers, just like the diagram that Dan showed you. Once we get the first layer, we work on the second layer, and so on up the line. I expect those quotes by the first of the month, first week of February. If you want to push the retention up to $500,000, I think you're going to see a great deal of premium savings associated with doing that. And honestly, given the lack of losses in the layer between 250 and 500,000, I will probably make a strong case for the district to consider pushing that retention up and saving dollars. In the 20 plus years that I've been working with CPS, the mantra we use with the underwriters is every dollar that you don't spend on insurance is a dollar we can use to educate a kid. So I really try to tug at their heartstrings with that. And I usually get a really good response because it's not something that they've ever thought about. Nobody's ever really put it to them in that way. But that's the reality of what we do for you. If you're not spending money on insurance, it's more money to do something else with that will benefit the district and the students.
Well, Michael,
So
we
I'm sorry?
really appreciate. Go ahead.
No, I was done. Thank you.
I know we appreciate your work, and I really, really appreciate the kudos to the folks that are making that record possible. And those folks need to get the shout outs more regularly because they are making a difference, and that money does go to kids and instruction. We do have in February there are three board meetings, the 8th and the 17th and the 22nd. Only the 22nd is after a finance meeting, but I don't know that we would need to meet again about this. I think this would then go directly to the board with the recommendation from you and General Counsel. Melanie or Ryan, do you think we need to have this back on our agenda before sending it to full board? No. Okay, great. So any one of those days, just Treasurer Wagner?
I just have one follow-up question. Since we're at the beginning of our budget cycle, I want to put a placeholder in there for this line item. Do you
Yes.
anticipate, if I did my math right, we had a 30% increase in premiums from last year to this year. You anticipate another 30% increase?
I would say that would be the worst case scenario. We're,
Okay.
again, if the retention goes up, I think the results can be far better than that because it means we'll likely be able to stay with Genesis, and they like you guys a lot. And they've already talked about not increasing premium, but actually giving money back if you go to a higher retention. Now, that's just preliminary discussions, but that's the type of conversation I enjoy hearing from my underwriters. Where the industry is really struggling is the high-level umbrella limits, as I put in my narrative. So the top layer of the 5 excess of 10, as we describe it in insurance parlance, 3 years ago, it was almost free. It literally cost nothing, $15,000, $20,000. Last year, I think it was 50 or 60,000, and I can't even begin to tell you what it's going to cost this year. And that's all due to the what they're calling these catastrophic claims that have occurred with umbrellas. If you think of the claim with Roundup that Bayer is paying, they call them nuclear verdicts, is what they call them. I kind of went brain dead there for a moment. So, you know, a lot of our clients are rethinking how much insurance they want to buy. And that's why we break it out in layers. And I actually had one client that reduced from 25 million to 10 million this past summer because it just was something that was very economical to buy in the past, no longer fit their budget in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you.
Then we'll be expecting a recommendation from General Counsel and from you, probably on increasing the, what do you call it, in order to reduce our premiums, possibly?
The retention.
Deductible.
The retention.
Yeah, retention
So,
and deductible. Yep.
and it does not need to return to finance, but Ms. Bruckner, if you'll make sure we know that to tell the President Jones that this will probably be coming up as some item. And then Mr. Hoyne, is that an item that appears in the treasurer's report, or is it a resolution? Treasurer's report?
Correct. Yes, we generally include this in the treasurer's report.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Thanks,
Michael,
everyone.
great seeing you.
Nice seeing all of you. Have a
Great.
good week.
You too. Pray God, and the creek doesn't rise, huh? Mr. Polanco, are you ready next?
Thank you very much.
Please.
I am, and I think
Yeah,
that
okay.
Shara's still on. Let's
Oh,
see
good,
if she-
good. I didn't see. I saw it at first, but
Yep, there
don't
she
see
is.
it now. Okay, wonderful. So if you both will get started, we're ready to take the preschool. It's been, I think, a couple of months since we've had you here, so welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
It's
so
good to
much.
be
We
here.
did. Yeah, we took December off and there was no Finance and Audit Committee meeting in December. And we've had our first meeting of the year. It went very well. And I will turn it to Hector to talk about audit results and the progress we've made on the committee charter.
Fantastic. Thank
Yeah,
you,
so
sir.
those were the two items we wanted to update the committee about. We received for our Finance and Audit Committee meeting the draft of the final audit report for the fiscal year 20. That's the year that ended in June 2020. And I am happy to say that the Finance Committee, Finance and Audit, and the board both approved to turn it now into a final, which basically means we have to change the date. But it was an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that an auditor will provide. So I want to say that I appreciate deeply the assistance of the United Way and of the Treasurer's Office in making this possible, because it is not just me. It is a team effort. So deeply appreciate that. That's the update on the audit. You will receive the actual PDF of the audit at the next meeting because I only received it a few minutes ago.
Wow, cool.
Okay, so that's one. Now we'll move on to doing the 990. and that one should be in about a couple of months that I presented to the committee as well. Next up is the committee charter, and I wanted to update the committee on that. We've been working on it for a couple of cycles now, and I think it's to the final stage where now it goes to our governance committee to make sure that it's approved. There was discussion back and forth about the composition of our Finance and Audit Committee. We ended with 6 members, which is where we started, 2 from each of the 3 entities that make up Cincinnati Preschool Promise. And we also added, for the benefit of the committee, external members, which will be, the committee has recommended, and so has council, that they be non-voting members. And the idea was brought by one of the committee members that it would be beneficial for us to be able to hear from the community, different aspects of the community, as what they see. Because us in the work every month for the board members and for staff every day, we might not see things that the community at large sees, or we might not interpret data like the community at large would interpret it. So it'd be beneficial for the committee to hear from them. That's the current charter that, like I said, it's before governance. Governance, I think, takes it up in March. And hopefully once that is approved, I will also bring it before this committee so that this committee can see it. Those were the 2 large items I wanted to make the committee aware of.
Great. Member Bates or Messer, do you have a question or a comment? I would only ask on the external members, how are they going to be selected? Do you know that process?
We do, actually. We, based on the comments from the committee members, there are 2 characteristics that drive who those members will be. First is the chair will suggest who the members are to become. And then second, the members must rotate every year, because the idea was to get different aspects of the community. So none of those community members should remain in the committee for too long. We want to get new perspectives every year. So the chair will nominate or appoint, actually, and then they'll rotate every year.
And what goes into the chair's consideration as well is the equity rubric and the equity policy that CPP adopted almost 2 years ago. So that is the lens, as well as an asset matrix that we do annually in alignment with our governance principles to say what are the skills that we need and what does the composition of our committees look like. So those 2 things will be considered by the chair when she makes her recommendations and reviewed by the governance committee as well. And then it is required to have unanimous approval by the board for that committee appointment to take place.
Great, thanks for that clarification and additional information. That seems reasonable. And technically, procedurally, it doesn't really happen quite like that for the board, but at least technically, the president of the board actually makes recommendations regarding appointments to committees too. So that sort of seems somewhat similar or reflective. So Treasurer or Mrs. Bates or Mr. Messer, any questions about any of that? I think that's exciting about the charter. We know how difficult sometimes that can be. Then when you've got 3 entities they have to deal with, and we appreciate your efforts. Any other items that you have for us, Mr. Polanco?
Not for this meeting. Like I said, next meeting we'll have the audit and we'll have some financials probably as well.
And if I can remind Mrs. Bruckner to make sure of that notation so we anticipate that for the finance agenda for February. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Good seeing both of you.
Eve, could I make one?
Oh, yeah, sure. I didn't see you, Brian.
That's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
Just one question, kind of more general. Going back to these couple thousand emails that are still in there that, we're just getting. They keep coming, by the way. But enrollment, like, so as far as our community providers, preschool, are they all open?
So we are doing an analysis week by week to say, what is the status of community providers being open? They are not having mandated closures. They are having temporary closures that is monitored by ODJFS and the Department of Health if they have anywhere from 2 days to 2 weeks, right, for temporary closures. We have done an analysis and say in our complete network of all providers, based on the pandemic, we've had 9 providers close. Some family, 8 family child care providers, 1 center. Some of those are consolidation of spaces, right? To say we don't have enough to fill a full classroom. Some of those have chosen to move out of district, but we haven't seen a significant seat loss or gain based on those 9 permanent closures. I don't know if that's responsive to your question or not, but yes, they are open, operational. Our enrollment now is at 616, which exceeded our goal of 600. We're looking to see that expand by adding new tuition assistance providers in that cohort every day. Based on not only those providers that were already in the system, but we are seeing those that are in the CPS footprint that weren't originally partnered with Preschool Promise, now accepting publicly funded childcare in a new population. And so we are recruiting them in. So you will actually see when I report out to the full board in February, our new dashboard that is going to give you a snapshot of what the complete community provider network looks like, what the seat count fluctuation looks like, and where we are in terms of enrollment and quality improvement in seats.
Great.
Thank you for asking that, Mr. Lester. That's good.
Yeah, and I think when you come back with that, I'd be very interested in, if you're tracking any of the health-related data in those centers. Because I think, it's like the real-world version of what we're trying to get to, and I think there's some confidence. I think one of our board members is even using one of those on a regular basis that's wide open, people coming in and out and the whole bit.
Right.
I didn't know if that was throughout the entire community preschool provider segment, but it may give some people some peace of mind if we can say, hey, some of our other partners have been open. Here's their experience, safety precautions, et cetera. Even with the little ones, we too can be safe in our classroom. So I was just curious on that one. So thank you.
I will also say that the Ohio Department of Health has done a wonderful job in maintaining a dashboard for all day camps and child care providers. You can go in and see county by county or name by name when a closure happened, what nature of the closure was, and how long the closure was, whether it was a staff exposure or student exposure. And I can provide the link to that. Would be happy to share it. We included in our last update to our board. That is a way that it's getting tracked statewide.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Very good info. Mr. Ashley, you're up. And are you feeling okay, Mr. Ashley?
Yes.
All right. Okay.
I had a little brush with COVID back in December. More than a brush, I guess, but we did well. My wife and I both kind of worked through it, so we're back to normal.
We heard, and we're glad that you've progressed. Appreciate it. We really need you to be as full speed as possible because we really depend upon you.
Well, thank you for asking. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Rob, if you'll pull up the COPS file, and then after that'll be the PowerPoint. Then we send you a bunch of files. There's the COPS file. So just briefly, as we're trying to cover this every month, COPS being, again, for certificates of participation. These were the debt proceeds from the 2018 issue. What you'll see on here, the last number in the last column to the right is 104,000. That is remaining, as well as the 20,000, 2 columns over, is encumbered. I did today, this was based on multi-year budgets that we had for the project. I did do another analysis of the cash that's in the cost centers. And I believe in the first cost center, there's some additional cash that perhaps wasn't budgeted. So I'm going to work with Robin. I sent this to Robin, Brandon, and I will touch base with her. We're going to just make sure, we got the right total. So there may be an update to this next month, but that's what we have at this point.
So, Kevin, let me interrupt for 1 second, please.
Yes,
The significance of this is that we have a deadline to spend this money down. Or do you remember the old VCAP thing that we went through last year? So we're trying to make sure that we spend it all down and don't get in IRS trouble.
Thank you.
Good point. So now I'll go on to the PowerPoint, which is the traditional slides that we give you each month. And you can go to the next page, which will be the revenues. One thing I was excited about in putting them together this time, as we're getting farther into the year, we're 6 months through the fiscal year. The columns on the right, can't quite see, but the first column is FY19, then FY20, FY21. And if you notice, they're fairly flat. So as we're getting farther along in the year, things are kind of smoothing out from year to year. We've had a couple months where things kind of fluctuated more, and we still have fluctuations within. And I tried to highlight just some of the key things so that blue box. Property taxes fiscal year to date are up about $2 million when you add in the tangible personal property tax. Advances are going to continue to be up because we just return those advances once a year. And this year, as we've talked about before, at the end of the fiscal year, as we were waiting on grant reimbursements that were kind of delayed, that caused our amount to be higher this year. And so, again, I don't anticipate any other advances in throughout the rest of the year. So that's going to be a factor. Refund of prior year expenditures. As I mentioned before, the E-rate reimbursements will fluctuate. We received a large catch-up last year. I think those are starting to increase again this year, but we don't expect to get as much as we did in the previous year. The other thing, and I believe this has been mentioned too, is the Bureau of Workers' Comp Rebater dividend. We did receive an additional over $3 million back in December. And one of the things, as we were looking through that, the workers' comp indicated that they were providing that to help out local governments and businesses as well throughout the pandemic. So that was kind of their intent, that would be a help to us, and of course it is. The only other thing I'll point out on the left side, there was a timing delay in some of the foundation payments, and that's why there's a bigger bump there for month to month. So December of this year to December of last year. Next slide, please, is expenditures. Again, with all that we have going on, there's still kind of an evening out as you get through the process. So when you look at the right columns, so a couple of key things that fluctuate there. Salaries and benefits are up about $1.8 million, and that is almost directly related to the COLA, cost of living adjustment, that was made in January of 20. So for FY19 or for FY20, that increase was not reflected, where now we have 6 months of that increase to all the employees. So along with other fluctuations, that's one of the key changes. Supplies and materials continue to be up about 1.7, and I would attribute that mostly to the new textbook adoptions in math. I feel like a broken record sometimes, but that's good, I think. Transfers out, those are going to kind of fluctuate throughout the year because as expenditures are made in the school-wide pool, those are drawn out of the general fund into the 598 school-wide pool fund. But currently that's about $4 million down from last year at this point. Next slide is cash and encumbrances. Again, I know the numbers are hard to read. On the green column in the right, that 98 million versus 114 million last year. Most of that is attributed to where our cash balance was sitting at the beginning of the fiscal year. And then additionally, our expenditures, as in prior years, are slightly ahead of our revenues, which is causing that to be a little bit lower as well. Encumbrances have kind of softened up back to where they were.
Kevin, can I jump in here real quick?
Go ahead.
I did a little deeper dive on the cash compared to last year. We spend money out of the state and federal grants, and then we get reimbursed. And the reimbursement is a lot behind this year than it was last year. So they owed us last year at this time about $700,000. This year it's $10 million. And so that 98 million in cash would be 10 million higher if they were on time. And so it would look more in line with the previous years, but clearly we're eating into our cash balance over the last couple of years because of our growth and the strain of that growth has on our revenues and expenses. Thanks, Kevin.
Sure, thank you. Okay, the next slide is tuition assistance. This is all put together based on enrollment information that comes from early child. It identifies for the month of December the number of students that are full-time, the number of students that are half-time, total, the summation of days for those students, and then there's a calculation to determine the tuition assistance amount. This is just those students who are eligible for the tuition assistance. At the very bottom of this slide, I have a number 15 is what early childhood provided as the total number of students enrolled in preschool. So as you can see, only about 557 of those 1,300 fall into this category. The year-to-date figures are showing the number of students is simply based on the number of them. This is 827. So in terms of the kids that fall into this category, you can see obviously that's down, as well as the number of days that they participated. So that year-to-date calculation, and we keep a running total of that, is down from 2.6 to 1.5. Next slide, please. This is kind of bringing together all the information that on CPS's side that we record centers for preschool and preschool expansion, workforce development. The revenues were previous month because we did not receive any additional tax revenue that had to be allocated. Tuition assistance are not made on a monthly basis. They're kind of made on a payment schedule that's done with United Way. So that middle column is December. The final column on the right is the year. So fiscal through December. The one on the right would be the prior year at the same point. So you can see United Way at this point, we have provided 3.2 million versus only 1.5 at this point last year. But I believe in January of last year was a big payment. So it could also be part of the timing there. I think that's really all I wanted to highlight on that particular capital outlay is up a little bit, I think, with the improvements for the rising Stars, the new Rising Stars building. I think some of those were taken out of here, or at least furniture and that kind of thing. So I don't know if you guys have any questions on that at this point. If not, then I'll pass it off to our next section. Taya Grenbondi is our manager of state and local grants. She is going to present a state and federal grants summary. So Rob, if you could pull that up for her, that would be great. Thank you.
Good afternoon, all. As Kevin said, my name is Taya Grenbondi, and I am the manager of the state and federal grants. And so what we have here is a summary of the state and federal grants for the current year. So towards the top, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this, but at the top in the header section, there's a percent of the grant year and the percent of the grant spent. And so the purpose of this is to show that the grants have a period of availability of 12 months. However, we receive an additional 3 months through September 30th to spend out expenditures that are currently encumbered. So that is what that 40% represents. We are 6 months into our 15-month grant availability. And so if you could scroll to the left. And so this is a representation of all the funds, 400s and 500s, and they are in numerical order. So going across the top, there's the total allocation column, and that total, so the total is 127 million, and it represents 105 million, and that's toward the bottom, but I don't know if you want to go back and forth. So that's the total, the 127 million, and it does include $22 million in carryover. So those are grant funds that we had access to in fiscal year 2020, but we did not spend. And so they were carried over into 2021. And because of the COVID, we actually received grant funds that normally do not carry over. We were actually allowed to carry over grant funds that typically are not allowed to be carried over. And so if going back up to the top, I'll just briefly go across the columns. So again, the first column is the total allocation. And then that total allocation is broken down between personnel and non-personnel budgets. The next column is the total expenditures. And again, the total expenditures are broken down by personnel and non-personnel expenditures. The next column is the encumbrances. So those are the encumbrances through December 31st. And then that leaves us with the total available amount. So next to that total available, again, we are breaking that down by personnel and non-personnel. So we have personnel, however, those dollars are committed to personnel. So they are budgeted to cover our personnel expenditures for the remaining of the year. So they're not truly available. There may be some leeway if positions aren't filled, but those funds are committed to personnel. The next column is the available non-personnel. And then the remaining columns, the year-to-date percent spent, and then there's the year-to-date with encumbrance spent. And so we want to differentiate that because the encumbrances, again, they have been encumbered. So it is likely that those funds will pay out. So that's why we have the year-to-date with encumbrance percent spent, and it shows a little higher percentage spent when you consider the encumbrances. And so again, going back to that, so the spend goal met column, that references the 40% at the top of the page. And so here, this is showing if they've met 40%, it'll state met. If the grant has not met 40%, it says not met. And then also the final column is carryover, just also kind of reinforcing if they're not spending in a timely manner and there's no carryover allowed, those funds would be lost, potentially lost at the end of the fiscal year. And so if you could scroll to the bottom, please. So it's also broken down between public and non-public because if you could scroll to the left, please. And this is just to reiterate that the public schools really receive a substantial amount of the allocation that is given to the district. If you could scroll up just a little bit, I just want to capture that total. So for the subtotals, that line represents the public portion of our total allocations. And then the non-public total line, the 21 million, represents the non-public's portion of our allocation. And so again, just wanted to differentiate that. Sometimes people think, oh, you have 127 million. And we do, we're the fiscal agent. However, 21 million of that is available to the public schools and not available for CPS to spend. Are there any questions?
Do any members have any questions?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, comment, sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think without knowing kind of the background on each of the grants and the rules of engagement, to know if the maybe the reason some of them are not spent is because of the environment that we're in. I mean, this is probably a general comment even to the previous section. I mean, as it relates to those slides, I actually expected a decent delta, and maybe that's a wrong assumption just because of the change in the environment, and I think I would have expected some additional or a greater difference from previous years just because we are remote, et cetera. It goes back, I guess, to the fixed costs and the variable costs, fixed cost salaries and all that's going to be the same, et cetera. But I didn't feel like I was getting out of that maybe some of the savings we got from being virtual, i.e. transportation, that would have impacted those numbers in a great way. So I think, what would help me is as we kind of go through these, is there a COVID impact, to the grants or to some of the other pieces of data we're looking at today, and what does that look like, and is that something that we can, given it's COVID, that if we can't spend them in the current environment for some reason because of the world we're in, will there be exceptions to extend them? Is there any impact there?
And so, yes, we did receive, with the carryover, again, we did receive a fund. So, for instance, our Title I, our Fund 572, 521T, typically there's a 15% limit carryover, and that limit was waived due to COVID. So, from fiscal year 2019 into fiscal year 21, that was waived. And so some of the grants that we normally, again, do not receive carryover for, we were allowed to carry over those funds. And then also keep in mind, all of these funds are supplemental in nature. So they should be used to provide additional services to the students. And so again, yes, the staffing, it is a fixed cost, but some of it was used to assist in the delivery during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And I do also.
Excuse me, Ryan, I think too that the topic you're raising, maybe we ought to also put that on the February month about COVID impact financially. I know that Jen has shared that back and forth, but having a kind of a all-inclusive, holistic look at that with the grants and also with the even out of the general fund and what have you. This might be of interest. So, Pat, if you can remember that we probably want to put that on the financial, finance agenda, COVID impact financially or something.
Yep, happy to.
Great, thanks, Jen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I interrupted somebody. I don't know. I didn't mean to.
Well, just one nuance that's part of this is like the student wellness grant. That was a 2-year grant. We got $8 million the first year and $12 million in the second year. And very little got spent out of the first year because of COVID, because the grant came so late to us that half of the year had gone by before we even figured out how we were going to spend it. And so you can see that the beginning balance there is 17 million. Well, 12 was this year's allocation. So we carried over 5 of the 8 from last year. And that was directly related to our inability to spend it.
Well, and
So
I
the-
know your budget process that you've been proposing also begins to address some of that effort of a holistic budget, which I think is great.
And the teams are, Tiane's team and Susan Bunty's team are putting together the recovery plans for the summer. I know that Susan, and they're going to be presenting this here in a board meeting soon, but I know that Susan's planning to use the Idea B carryover money to fund her summer learning. We'll probably end up having to use the new CARES to do the non-DSL stuff because we're offering it to all students, not just title students. But we'll get into more details, and then in February I'll catch you up on the COVID spend.
Yeah, I appreciate this chart a lot. It really has helped me. It's been very helpful and good. Is there anything to add? I know we're running Ms. Bates.
Yeah, one question. Which of these are part of the school-wide pool?
So it's part of Title I, Fund 572. So the allocation, it's 521T. So of the 27 million of the allocation, 16 million is going to school-wide pool.
Okay.
Good question.
Anything else from members or the treasurer?
Ms.
Great. Yes.
Just one point to Mr.
Sure.
Messer's question. It's a very good observation relating to that. I think in kind of looking at the detail, as he mentioned, we expect the savings in transportation. Then on the other hand, we also see increases in ITM, lease purchases, that kind of thing, as well as supplies. So, but we can certainly have additional information with that next month.
Okay, that would
Thank
be great.
you.
All right.
And then I
Thank
believe
you.
Ms. Hughes is going to do the next section. Kimberly Hughes.
Okay.
Could I add just one more thing to that?
Sure.
I think there's a COVID impact, maybe. And then I think there's also this, as it relates to the grants and our funding, maybe there's going to be like a Biden impact. Because a question that I've gotten recently, are you expecting a change in how schools are going to be funded based on the new president? But I think we have two variables in 2021 that is going to make maybe your jobs more complex, maybe a little more fun because there's maybe more money available, just given kind of what we're hearing. But I think that'd be two interesting things that I'd love to know more about as we kind of go through that might be useful.
Right. The third factor is DeWine's budget and what happens with the fair funding.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Never a dull moment in our.
Never a dull moment.
Okay, so I'd like to briefly introduce you to Kim Hughes, your new assistant treasurer, Kimberly.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Hi, how are you?
Great.
Good. So I am going to be presenting the CRA information. Should also be included in your packets. Currently, there are 9 properties that are being presented for your review. These calculations are still based on the 25% rate. These will be presented at the next board meeting for the full board approval. As I looked through them, they were pretty standard. They were the residential rental properties, the commercial properties, parking lots, and there were a couple of them that were for storage, for warehouse storages. With that noted, we have been in contact with our city representative, Michael Banish. They do have a new boilerplate that includes the 33% rate. Our legal department has reviewed it. They did find some typos, and we sent it back to the city, and they're going to revise that information. So any future CRAs that we receive will be under the 33% rate. That's pretty much the information that I have for you related to the CRAs. I will add that we will be doing our first half billing this month. where we will be billing for our CRAs at the end of this month. And then we'll do it again in April. Do you have any comments or questions?
How are the kids?
They're doing well. Grown.
I know that. I know. I remember when they were like at college, fundamental with an CPA and what have you. So, well, that's a good report.
Thank you.
Any members have any questions? Well, that's pretty good, Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Watch out for those city people.
Okay, will do.
And now we'll go to our treasurer, who has like 5 minutes to do 3 things, and she'll break the record.
Yeah, they're really quick. The first one is, and I think I forwarded this to you, but it's been posted on board docs. We received a letter from Ohio Department of Education because the third year of our 5-year forecast shows a negative cash deficit. And so they send the standard letter out to say, how are you going to close that gap? Here, filled out this worksheet. If they don't like it, they'll do it for us. And we have until March 15th to get that done. So the plan was for the superintendent and I to get together. The good news is the increase in property valuations that gave us some more revenue is going to help significantly reduce that deficit. So the solution might not be that difficult. But anyway, Finance Committee on the 18th is when we'll share the plan, and then the board, if they have to adopt it on the 22nd before the March 15th deadline.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. The second letter, I just wanted to give you a CARES Act update. They've started releasing information on CARES 2.0. Initial information said we'd get about 4 times the amount that we got last time. Early simulations are much higher than that 4 times, but we all know things change very rapidly, and so I'm cautioning everybody not to get too excited. But the estimate less a state set aside might get us about $100 million to help over the next 2 years. But as more information comes, I'll keep you updated. Rumor has it the student wellness will get refunded for another 2 years in DeWine's budget, but we'll see next month. And you want me to do the refunding thing real quick too?
Yeah, let's do the thing we added to the agenda.
Okay. So I got an email yesterday or the day before from PNC Bank, and we have 2 COPS issues that 2014, 2015 that helped us fund our portion of the facility master plan. Because the rates are so low right now, we could save about $250,000 a year in debt and interest payments if we do the refunding. And so in order for us to get that started, we need to do the refunding resolution. And Brenda's already been alerted, and she's just waiting for me to say, yeah, go for it. We're probably going to have to do our credit rating updates this year anyway with Fitch. So we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone and get it refunded, if you will bless that effort.
That's great.
Okay. So did I make my 5 minutes?
That's all you did. You came under your 5 minutes. I'm impressed. And I'll come for less than 1 minute just to the members before we move to the 3 items under transportation. If members and the treasurer will look at the work plan for last year, it's posted on board docs, and we will be readjusting the work plan as we need to. So if you have some ideas, you can bring them to the February meeting, and we can adjust then and adopt then so that we have a work plan in place. If there's something you think might be very substantive, then maybe we can submit and talk a little bit about it if you put it through probably Phyllis or Pat. But right now, if you'll take the next month to review the work plan, we'll adopt on the February meeting. Having said that, we have our wonderful transportation department to report, and I think they have some proposals that we have to consider. And there he is, Mr. Johnson.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So I believe Ms. Davis has forwarded you guys an actual 3-page memo that will go into greater detail regarding the presentation that you have before you right now. So quickly, we want to kind of give you guys a financial update and briefing on our finances to date regarding our services. Next slide. So last meeting, we were asked to kind of give you guys an overview of our current spend and versus our working budget. Here is the total breakdown based upon service area, and I'm identifying those service areas as CPS schools, charter schools, non-pub schools, and of course our fuel costs being the four major areas that make up our budget. If you see here, we have a working budget of roughly $33 million that comprises of all the services that we provide for CPS specific students. When we get down to our charter community schools, we are roughly spending just under $5 million within our working budget at 4.8. And then for our non-pub schools, we're roughly at 3.5 mil. You'll see the grand totals at the bottom being roughly about $44 million. A little caveat to that, we have approximately $4,854,000 there that is inclusive of prior year encumbrances that was carried over so we could close out any expenditures from that year. So that would roughly bring our true working budget down to FY21 to roughly about $39 million. If you see over to the right, the balance of the $11 million, part of that is the funds that was left over for to be allocated to sorter contract that you guys just approved yesterday to add the additional funds to that contract for the rest of the year. It is important to note that the working budget that we are currently operating under is comprised of the reductions that we have put in place. One being the Walnut Hills Metro service. The other thing is being 100% remote on Mondays, and of course, fuel savings. Of those three major bucket areas where we did siphon out those reductions, one would be for sure that we should be okay with, which will be those fuel savings. But when we talk about Walnut Hills going back into person learning in the blended learning model, we are now going to have to incur those costs with Metro. So there will be some revisement or possible needed extra funds for that. As well as I know there's looming talk of eventually getting to 5 days a week. So just want to make sure that we are always staying aware that those were the reductions that we took out of our budget to account for that. Next slide. All right, so I want to give you guys an overview of where that money kind of breaks down to. If you look at it, First Student, of course, is our largest transportation provider right now, with roughly $12.7 million in services that they provide for us. The next big one would be United Transportation Systems, UTS, at $8 million, and then, of course, our sorter contract, followed by Queen City and Peterman, and then ALC. Big note that I just really want to drive home this message that we worked very hard over the last couple of years to get be efficient with our services, but also we want to make sure that we are effective with the services that we are providing. So I thought it would be good to actually give you guys a highlight of some of the services since we've came back from winter break. We've had 3 service days with 100% of all vehicles reporting GPS. And a collective daily average of GPS reporting of 98.5%, which the biggest thing that I want to kind of hang down my hat on is the 8 service days with 90% or better on-time performance, and that's within 5 minutes of the scheduled arrival time. And we are currently averaging a daily average of 90%. What this means is, we are successfully executing our routes with very little impact to the instructional day of students. And we're hoping to continue this success as we bring students back in February. Next slide. So one of the things that we want to approach the Finance Committee and get full support on is to
Sorry. Thank you. And I think I heard you at the end that we're going to bring back some talk about what we did in February. Did I hear that correctly? Or
I,
update to? Because very frankly, I haven't really seen the documents. I'm sorry if I missed them from the. I'm sure Ms. Davis sent them, but I haven't had a chance to review them. But this has been helpful as an introduction.
Mhm. Yeah, so the documents were sent to Ms. Davis today. So it's a 3-page memo. I can send it to you directly if you want.
Oh no, Phyllis, I'm sure has it. I just, that's something that would like to be able. I think we'd all like to be able to review. So February we'll probably be talking about transportation as well. So including some of those amounts and what have you. It's very detailed.
Okay. So what we want to kind of approach the Finance Committee with and get full support is the execution of our first year extension to our 5-year contracts. Of course, many of our major contracts right now is in their 5th and final year. Within all of our contracts, we have a clause that allows us to extend for 2 1-year terms as a renewal term to all of our contracts. We're looking for full support. Of course, this has to be board approved. We are fully prepared to work with General Counsel and the execution of those documents so we can go into a 1-year renewal of those contracts. Next slide, please. So with that, it will be us executing a RFP for all of our transportation services that we request throughout the district. And so with that, we kind of want the support to be able to renew those terms with the understanding and guidance that we want to establish a clear scope of objectives and requirements for required services and equipment. A lot of that is hinged on the pandemic. Of course, this has uncovered many areas that we need to work on operationally or even within our contracts to be able to better support our students. The new standards that have been outlined, as well as the evolving challenges of which remain fluid to date regarding this pandemic. It makes it kind of unstable to provide a full scope of required services that we want our providers to bid on for us. The other thing in there is the looming questions regarding the board decision on high school boundaries, as well as eligibility of services directly related to eligible students. So we really want those things to be kind of solidified or very close to being solidified so we can provide a true form of scope in which our providers can aggressively bid on for our services. The other area is define a realistic timeline for successful execution of the RFP. What we are proposing is to allow the RFP process to develop that scope to be accurately defined to potential bidders. Otherwise, we run the risk of having a subpar bid, and we don't want people to just haphazardly just submit bids and not understand our true needs as a district, especially given this time with being in a COVID pandemic. The other thing is we want this process to begin in July of 2021, and with a full execution of new contracts being ready to start in July of 2022. And that would give us a full year to not only publish the RFP, hold all the meetings with the vendors or potential vendors, and then execute the award of those contracts, and allow our vendors adequate amount of time to get their operations up to the level that we want them to perform at going into the school year for 2022, 2023. The other thing is to surely control our costs. The higher risk will result in an increased cost to the district. Right now, the unknowns given the pandemic is really creating a ripple effect within the pupil transportation industry. Some of our counterparts, such as Akron, was out for our RFP earlier this year, and actually had to rescind that RFP because they only had one vendor actually bid on it, and the terms that vendor wanted was not feasible economically for Akron. And so I want to make sure that we're putting ourselves in the best position when we do go to market for new rates. With doing a 1-year extension, this will also allow us to stabilize our rates for at least the next fiscal year with known costs. And then by getting the rates reestablished through the RFP process by early fall, we will be in a position to know what our costs will be going into the 22-23 school year for fiscal year 2023. Next slide, please. So Sarah's going to help me out and chime in here a little bit with this, but I kind of want to give you guys a big overview of service continuity. One driver pretty much equates to 192 students getting transported. And so for the 2 weeks before the start of services in October, the decision to extend the delay of in-person learning resulted into a variance between 13 and 22% of their essential personnel. This created sub-levels of contingency staff having to be utilized to actually operate our routes and everything. And so it puts us at a very disadvantage, but kudos to all the vendors of being able to scrap together and not have any loss of service due to personnel during that time frame. And
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I did want to chime in briefly on this topic. So this year we've had an especially unique challenge making sure that we can have service continuity for transportation services during the pandemic. So if you think about our need to change learning models, as the pandemic was changing, so started in distance learning, then went to blended, had to go back to distance, and now we're getting ready to go back to blended. Our challenge is trying to balance being able to realize the cost savings, right? Mr. Messer was alluding to it earlier, is if kids aren't in school, we should have transportation savings. But what we also need to balance that with is being ready to go back on blended learning. And so, and we've had an example with that with our own staff, similar to how we maintain our own staffing levels during distance learning, because we want to make sure we have a very smooth transition back into blended learning and that everything is safe when the kids are coming back. And so we have this same challenge here with our drivers, because we want to make sure that we are able to smoothly reopen. And so we are going to be recommending, and want to have your comments or questions on this, an MOU that will allow us to pay the driver wages during this particular distance learning period so that they are not laid off or furloughed. And that's really in an effort to maintain those drivers so we can get back to blended learning. So as Lauren mentioned, last time we did lose a significant portion of our drivers, and so we're trying to prevent that again. The drivers are running service runs during this time of distance learning, so kind of test runs of their routes to make sure that the routes are as efficient as possible and that the vehicles are staying in working order. Based on our analysis with our vendors, this would be a cost that could be upwards of $1.5 million. So it's not an insignificant amount, but I do want to make sure that this is clear. This is not a budget increase of $1.5 million. It would be a cost savings that we wouldn't realize. And we hadn't calculated any of those cost savings yet into our budget work with the treasurer as far as being able to meet our budget target. So that is our proposal for the MOU to the transportation contracts. And so we just wanted to present these topics for you guys for questions and comments before it gets submitted to the treasurer's report. And that concludes the presentation.
Great. Do any members have any questions? I have a couple of comments. Okay.
Yeah, nothing. Sorry, just
Go
nothing
ahead.
other than it's one thing for sure and I missed all you guys on finance last year. One thing for sure though, this transportation is just such a beast. Not just the spending, but according to Mr. Johnson, like just will we have sufficient suppliers in the future, and what's that going to look like? And then if you almost have like one option, they can charge you whatever they want and provide you whatever service you want because you're kind of stuck. So good reality check. I appreciate the update and the ongoing efforts to maximize this spend. Thank you.
Melanie, you said you're okay right now, or? My comment, I need some explanation, the difference between the extension of the current contracts, which I'm not at this time predisposed to say yes to, until at least we're a little bit further in discussion, maybe even mid-February or so, as to what the budget process is looking like. I hate to make such a commitment, but I understand you're interested. What's the difference between the extension of the existing contracts for 1 year versus the RFP that you've mentioned?
The biggest difference would be the time. If we go out and put out an RFP right now, it will be unreasonable and impractical to expect to get a good quality response, especially a response for that service to start for next school year, which is only a few short months away. So my office has already transitioned over to planning for 21-22 school year. And so we really need our vendors in place by June to know who we're allocating those resources to. And if there is a new vendor, which we would hope to get maybe new life into our market area, we also have to account for them to have time to set up operations within our market area as well. And so because of those factors right there, it's not prudent to kind of move forth with an RFP with a expected end date to start services in the 21-22 school year. It is best practice to give them about a year's time to develop that and work out our working relationships with our new vendors.
We do need an RFP. We do need an RFP after next school year, but as well, even if you do the extensions, correct? So
That's correct.
But you're saying one of the reasons you want to do extension is to lock down the amounts of money and services and vendors and what have you, without having to do an RFP for next year.
Correct. And keep in mind, the RFP process will start now. And so I already have probably the RFP drafted out about 90%. And so what's missing is how these changes with COVID and the other areas that I identified in the presentation will impact our scope of work that we're looking for.
I still am not, and I'm only one board member, I'm still not ready to extend, and it may make perfect sense, extend the current contracts for a year until we have a little bit more discussion about the monies that we have and don't have. And locking down that amount. But I understand that going ahead on the RFP, I hate to subsidize our vendors because there's not drivers, but that makes more sense to me and is an immediate need. So I'm supportive of that, recognize the need, but I'm not ready to, as one member, give the okay to extend the current contracts until we really know what the next CPS looks like, or at least have some indication as to where to your point about the geography and the division. I think there's enough time for us to at least talk about that for another month or so, because I know the board's meeting on the 30th again, and I know the treasurer and other people are working together on budget. But I would be supportive, and hate it, but I would be supportive of the driver situation and helping that, and understand you need a longer term or later RFP. And I understand why we don't want to do an RFP for next year. I understand that, but I'm still not ready to say yes, at least one person, not ready to say yes to the extension, 1-year extension contracts yet.
Yeah.
But I understand I really appreciate the explanation.
Yes. And if there's any more additional information that I could provide to help inform the board, inform the committee, please let me know. be more than happy to provide as much information as I possibly can.
Yeah, I think it will. It could influence and impact some of the discussion the board might be having when we talk about the next CPS. Because as Mr. Messer mentioned, it remains a bear, remains a monster as a cost center, and we appreciate all the work that's been done. But it'd be great to give us just a few more weeks, at least as a board, to begin to talk a little bit more about that. But the driver thing, you almost have to do that yesterday.
Yes.
And the RFP will be for the next CPS. So let's also not jump ahead on that. So whatever that mythical next CPS is, or that new norm, or what have you. But this presentation was helpful. And all the documents we've gotten, Treasurer Wagner, from everybody, they will be sent and uploaded onto board docs for other board members as well to see. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. All of our documents have already been loaded, but I don't think I have the transportation one. At least I haven't seen it yet. So we'll make sure that Phyllis can get it or Pat can get it to post it.
Fantastic. So are we okay right now on transportation, Ms. Bates? Are you okay with me saying I'm not yet ready to do the extension so we have a little bit more discussion and understand about the driver? Are you okay with the driver as well as the conductor? Are you okay about the driver issue? Great. So that seems to be where we are, and this was helpful to understand the timing of the RFP and wanting to resist one for the near future, but start planning for the next future. Let's hold on the extension, 1 year extensions. Not long, but let us have a chance to talk more about it.
Okay.
That would be great. Sarah, did you have, I think I interrupted you at least 3 times.
No, Miss Bolton, I'm good.
Okay. Yes, you are. Great. Yes, you are. Any other issues? I think we've done the agenda, and we only slightly went over. So that was pretty good. And welcome the people that have not presented before. It's great to see everybody. Mr. Ashley, you get well, totally. Okay, all right. Ms. Bates, anything to close out? If not, we're ready to adjourn. Do you have anything you want to make sure we're doing in February? Good. Semester?
No, I'm just glad to be back with the finance crowd, the money people.
We're so glad to have you back. Uh-oh, Nolan's got her hand up. Watch out now. This could be, yeah? Mel?
Yeah. So if we are going to move legislative to health and safety, we have to change our bylaws first.
Yes.
So we need to make that proposal at the next full board meeting. So can you do that?
I will do that. That was my assignment to me.
Yes.
Okay. But only if it's going to health and safety.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, only if it's going to health and safety. We don't want to lose it here and send it somewhere else. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I like it staying with me because
absolutely.
I've been working on this for years.
I know. Any other assignments?
No.
Hearing none, we are adjourned. Appreciate everybody.
Thank you.
Sorry. Bye-bye.
Thanks, team.